Good evening, everyone. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us both here in Washington and through our live webcast globally. I'd like to extend a special word of thanks to the many ambassadors and Atlantic Council board directors, Atlantic Council members who are here in attendance. It's terrific to see such a great audience, particularly on a Friday evening. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, I think this is very much a credit to you and, of course, the growing influence and dynamism of your country. I'd also like to I particularly want to greet the Turkish ambassador with whom we've enjoyed a wonderful relationship. And also Kemal Dervish, where are you sitting, sir? Who did so much to set the Turkish economy on the right path in a previous government. So it's great to have you here as well, sir. I'd warmly like to thank Frank Kelly of Deutsche Bank and Deutsche Bank for their ongoing sponsorship of the Mapping the Economic and Financial Future Speakers Forum. We've hosted so many economic and financial leaders throughout the series, so I'll just name a couple: Christine Lagarde, Bob Zoellick, and most recently this week, U.S. Chamber of Commerce President Tom Donahue. So Deputy Prime Minister Babacan, you're in good company. I also wanted to add that tonight's event is a great example of the collaborative strength of the Atlantic Council's regional programs and thematic programs. We have 9 programs and centers at the Atlantic Council. This one is co-hosted by the Global Business and Economics Program, directed by Alexi Montserrat, and the Dinu Patriciu Eurasia Center, run by Ambassador Ross Wilson, former ambassador to Turkey and to Azerbaijan. We do a lot of this sort of thing. We have now our Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East, and it partners very closely with the Scowcroft Center, the Center for International Security of the Atlantic Council. We have an energy and environment program. It can work together with our Africa Center. And so this is the way that we get a lot more done at the Atlantic Council, by working both globally and with our transatlantic base on a mixture of issues. I also wanted to say how proud we are to host the Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan tonight, who is both one of the world's more successful economic policymakers and also a very good friend of the Atlantic Council. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, we're grateful to you for accepting our invitation today, but we're also very grateful for the time and support you have given to our Black Sea Energy and Economic Forum, both in 2010, 2011. This has now found its permanent home in Istanbul. The Atlantic Council's first international office is in Istanbul, underscoring the importance of your country. We look forward to hosting you again at this year's event, renamed the Atlantic Council Energy and Economic Summit. Since Turkey didn't want to be limited by the Black Sea, we decided we wouldn't be either. That will take place November 15th, 16th in Istanbul. Turkey is one of the world's outstanding success stories. The poor, inflation-ridden, and often ill-managed Turkey of the past has been transformed. Economic and political openings dating back to the mid-1980s, plus the country's response to a terrible financial crisis in 2001, are part of the explanation. But among other key factors, none has been as important as the strongly pro-market, pro-financial management, and pro-globalization hand Turkey's current leadership has had, and in particular, that of Ali Babacan. The country is not without its problems, and I'm sure the Deputy Prime Minister will address these. Current account deficit, which rose to 10% of GDP before falling back in recent months, is unsustainable and represents an obvious vulnerability. But the story underlying that is nevertheless dramatic. To formally introduce Minister Babacan, it's my pleasure to introduce my mentor, and in many ways my inspiration, the chairman of the Council's International Advisory Board, General Brent Scowcroft. Though General Brent Scowcroft is a man who needs no introduction, I'll nevertheless give a very brief one. But before I do that, I do want to ask that when we finish the question and answer session, that if you remain seated to allow our guest to depart, and I really appreciate it if you would do that. Brent Scowcroft has been a valued counselor to every president since Richard Nixon, including serving as National Security Advisor to Presidents Gerald Ford and the first President Bush. As I said, he's chairman of the International Advisory Board of the Atlantic Council, former chairman of the Atlantic Council, and a longtime board member. From these positions, he has faithfully and ably led the Atlantic Council for many years, including now, importantly, lending us his name. This fall, the Council will formally open the Brent Scowcroft Center on International Security, which is really already operating as the International Security Program of the Atlantic Council. And it will carry on what we consider the Scowcroft appeal, an approach to foreign policy that includes reaching across political aisles and lines, which we think will, again, become fashionable, to build effective solutions, strengthening existing partnerships, and forging new ones, all thoughtfully equipping the next generation to tackle the problems of tomorrow. So I'm honored to be able to call General Scowcroft my inspiration and friend. It is my great pleasure to introduce him here tonight. General Scowcroft.
Thank you, Fred, for that over-the-top introduction. I didn't deserve it, but I enjoyed it. This is a very special afternoon for me, a particular pleasure. I first met the Deputy Prime Minister when he took office in 2002, in the first AKP government. And he was 35 years old, young, taking over at a very difficult time. This was not just a simple change of government. This was a fundamental change in Turkey. And he has done a fantastic job. When I met him, he was Minister of State for the Treasury, as I say, in the very early years of AK party governance. Ali Babacan was the point person for taking the initial pieces of the banking and financial recovery forum that was developed by Kemal Dervish in the previous government to lay the groundwork for a very difficult crisis in 2001, but preceded by difficult years of inflation. The Turkish economy was not a model of stability and progress. But he took that government, took the plans laid in by Kemal Dervish, and both implemented them and building from them the pieces that would bring about the real prosperity that Turkey now enjoys. The results, as I say, are manifest and dramatic now. He also played a key role in the opening of accession negotiations to join the EU in late 2005. And that also contributed to the economic reform program and in overseeing the initial preparatory work and diplomacy as well. Ali Babacan fulfilled these roles so successfully that following the AKP's re-election in 2007, Prime Minister Erdogan made him foreign minister. As foreign minister, he helped take Turkish diplomacy in some new and promising directions, of which for the United States particularly pleasing was the effort at rapprochement with Armenia and their their long-standing problems in the region. In 2009, a mid-term cabinet reshuffle brought Ali Babacan back to the economic side of the House and into his current position as Deputy Prime Minister responsible for oversight of the economy. If his first stint was dominated by the internal legacy of the 2001 economic crisis and getting EU accession started, his second term has been marked by the economic problems and issues created for Turkey and the world by the financial and economic problems that first appeared in the United States in 2008 and became a contagion in Europe that endures today. His success in those efforts, I think, are manifest. Minister Babacan brings a strong Turkish model to the table and also now an unusually experienced set of hands to the G-20, where he is now a prominent member. Fred mentioned Minister Babacan's friendship toward the Council and our annual Energy and Economic Forum in Istanbul. As a Fulbright scholar at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, he also became a good friend of the United States as well as of the Atlantic Council, a twofer. We are very fortunate to have this wise leader playing such an important role for Turkey and in the high circles of global financial government. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan.
General Scowcroft, President Kempe, Ambassador Wilson, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today with you all, and also it's a great pleasure to see so many old and good friends in the room. At the outset of my speech, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the Atlantic Council for organizing this event here in Washington, D.C., but also for the Council's contribution to the Turkish-American relations. And I would like to comment on the Atlantic Council's work for the energy and economy, initially for the Black Sea region, but now it's become a regular periodical event in Istanbul, turned into a summit, and also almost a global organization nowadays. And allow me also to start my remarks to touch a little bit about bilateral relations between Turkey and the United States. Turkey and the United States are two countries which are friends, partners, and allies. We have stood together in many international challenges strongly together. What's more, major international issues that our countries have to deal with at present are very much overlapping. These issues include Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Middle East peace process, North Africa and Balkans, Caucasus, Central Asia, energy supply security, fight against terrorism, prevention of nuclear proliferation, and also tackling the global financial crisis. When I first started my position as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I asked my counterpart back then, Secretary Rice, why don't you just list the top 10 foreign policy issues of the US, and I will list mine, and let's compare those lists. Almost every single of those 10 items are identical. Although we seem to be far away on the map geographically, the kinds of subjects that Turkey and the United States are dealing with internationally and regionally are so overlapping. Ours is a time-tested and real partnership. It has witnessed several political and critical phases, I would say, in recent history, and today our partnership immensely is relevant not only for our countries, but for a very wide region. Recent developments in the Middle East and North Africa once again highlighted the significance of Turkish-US cooperation. Turkey and the US have been consulting very frequently and exchange views on the events in our region and beyond. continuation of this close cooperation and coordination is very much essential. Ladies and gentlemen, Turkey and US share and promote the very same values around the world. Democracy, fundamental human rights, freedoms, rule of law, and we share the very same targets: peace, stability, security, and prosperity for all. When Secretary Clinton came to Turkey as one of her very first overseas trip, and when we had the joint press conference, she described Turkey and the US as two countries which have a sense of global responsibility. And when we had our very first meeting with President Obama after he came to his job, to his new position, he called our partnership a model partnership, a partnership which can be a good example for other countries as well. We started a framework for strategic and economic commercial cooperation. We first had meetings here in DC in 2010. The second set of meetings will take place in June this year. We have formed a business council between Turkey and the US. It's the first time in our history that the economic and commercial subjects are being taken at very high level, at cabinet level, by two cabinet members from two sides. In 2011, our exports increased by 22%, our exports to the US, and our imports from US increased by 30%. So the momentum is already growing when we look at the trade figures. And last year, we received 675,000 US citizens as a tourist to Turkey. So this is also very important. Human-to-human touch is also an important aspect of our relations. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Middle East and North Africa, the region which Turkey is centered in, is going through a historical transition process. And this process is long overdue. It is a homegrown process, and this is quite an irreversible process as well. The process is quite unique for every country and will probably go through several phases and stages. The will and aspirations of the people is being better and better reflected to the way how these countries are governed. Turkey is doing a lot of work in many of these countries, and most of our work is simply sharing our experiences of our own democratic transformation that we have gone through and we are still going through to a certain extent, and also our experiences of the economic transformation that we lived through. We believe that a functioning example is probably much better than prescriptions written somewhere else outside those countries. I'm just actually coming from a G8 meeting called Deauville Partnership, a meeting how to involve G8 countries with several more countries and help the countries in different phases of their transition. Better private sector involvement and strong economic programs, multi-year programs to bring predictability is going to be very important for most of those countries. When we talk about Middle East and North Africa, I would like to touch a few points about Syria. Right now, what's going on in Syria is a serious human rights crisis. Escalations of violence has costed deaths of thousands of people. It's a humanitarian tragedy that's going on. We hosted the second conference of a group of friends of the Syrian people in Istanbul at the beginning of this month, on 1st of April. 81 countries, as well as many international organizations, joined the conference. We made an urgent, comprehensive, and immediate implementation of all the elements of Kofi Annan's plan former Secretary General who is now the representative of not only the UN, but the Arab League as well. Syrian National Council, the one and only serious and credible opposition formation of the Syrian people, has been given legitimacy in the Istanbul meetings. Recognition as the representation of people of Syria was very important for the Syrian National Council. We need to see visible, verifiable, and indisputable signs of change on the ground. Primary responsibility to end the violence rests with the Syrian regime. We welcome the resolution which was adopted on April the 14th by the United Nations Security Council. The message was, at least finally, the international community stood up with one single voice. It's a step in the right direction. The resolution envisages a UN supervision mission, and we are pleased that the advanced team is already on ground. We believe that a sufficient number of observers should be deployed as soon as possible. And the key indicator at this stage is whether peaceful demonstrations can be held free from violent repression. So this is going to be an important test on ground. We are expecting the Syrian regime to fully and visibly fulfill its commitments in their entirety in accordance with the said Security Council resolution. Turkey has already adopted an open door policy for the citizens of Syria who have been actually fleeing from the oppression and the violence. We have set up 8 camps in which right now approximately 25,000 Syrian citizens are living temporarily. Egypt. Orderly and timely conclusion of the democratic transition is essential for this country. It will have important repercussions for the entire region. Egypt is the most populated and probably the most important country in the Arab world. And what happens in Egypt is going to set a very important example for many countries to follow. Conclusion of the elections for the People's Assembly and the Shura Council, as well as opening of the new parliament, represents a significant phase in the Egypt's democratic transformation. Yet, as the transition process gathers momentum towards the presidential elections, the tension has started to rise. Delays in democratic transformation would bring by people's frustration and resentment. The Egyptian people have been, for a very long time, aspiring for a full democratic system. Economic reforms and austerity measures are also very urgent for Egypt, as well as for many other countries in the region. If the political transformation is not accompanied by the economic transformation, then it may be a big setback for the citizens of many countries. Yemeni government and the opposition in Riyadh on November 23rd last year embarked a political transformation process. And all parties in Yemen, if they just fully implement the terms of this agreement, it will be very crucial for that country. We welcome the presidential elections, and we think it's an important step forward. Now, the Yemenis should convene an inclusive national dialogue conference with the spirit of reconciliation and solidarity, reform their constitution, reorganize the military and security forces, and hold the presidential and parliamentary elections by 2014 latest. We attach importance to the Friends of Yemen process, and we will actively participate the next meeting, which will take place in May in Riyadh. Bahrain International Commission of Inquiry on the recent events was a good example, upholding the principles of the rule of law and accountability. We welcome the reforms that has been in the area of security, judiciary, media, and education. The opposition should be encouraged to act with a spirit of reconciliation, common sense, and reason. The risk of sectarian confrontation is still valid, and all sides need to act with common sense. Tunisia and Libya, 2 countries which we should also try to help during this post-revolutionary period. Tackling the economic situation is a major challenge in Tunisia. There is an urgent need to restructure the Tunisian economy. And we are working on joint projects, and we are sending teams, receiving teams for technical support. Libya is definitely a much more difficult case. The restructuring of the Libyan National Army and police, reintegration of the militias into the society, and preparations for the National Congress elections are the main challenges ahead. Also, uncontrolled weapons in the hands of Libyan civilians and other possible smuggling to neighboring countries pose a real danger to the stability, not only for Libya, but also for the countries across the region. We hope the elections for the National Congress could be held as scheduled in June this year. We are engaged with the interim government and actively assisting them in various fields. So far, we have offered technical training programs to more than 3,000 Libyans in various fields during the course of this year, and we will help to convert 1,500 militias into law enforcement officers. We are also planning to contribute United Nations Special Mission in Libya in the field of effective implementation of social services. On the Middle East peace process, Turkey has always promoted a two-state solution that would create a state of Palestine living in peace and security with the state of Israel. We support the efforts for the resumption of the negotiations between the parties, yet the Israeli government's continued intransigence on the settlements remains a major obstacle for the peace process. Indeed, the recent efforts of the resumption of the peace process did not yield any results either. Talks should not be expected to make progress unless it starts with a serious commitment from the Israeli government to respect the existing parameters, particularly on the 1967 borders. President Abbas, during his visit to Turkey in February, confirmed that the Israeli position during the exploratory talks in Amman was mainly focused at altering the established parameters, which we think is a step in very wrong direction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Turkey is now a provider of economic and logistic support through our different agencies. And our official development aid last year exceeded $1.3 billion. I'm thinking that Turkey was an aid-receiving country until year 2004, and now we are an emerging donor country is also a sign of how things have actually changed. And actually, last year, across the OECD countries, we were the country which increased its ODA with the highest percentage, 38% increase over the year of 2010. We have now development programs in more than 100 countries across the world. In Africa alone, we increased the number of our embassies from 12 to 27, but back in 2008, we targeted for 34, and those 34 embassies will be completed by the end of next year. Turkish Airlines already fly to 19 African cities non-stop. Turkish Airlines now is, by the way, third largest airline in Europe with more than 190 destinations worldwide. This could be probably a good transition to now what I will be telling you about the Turkish economy, an economy which really went through a very serious transformation process. Before the 2008-2009 crisis, we have made many important reforms in Turkey. In 2004, 5, and 6, we made major reforms in our banking sector. A brand new banking law, a brand new saving deposits insurance fund law, a brand new mortgage law, credit card law. These laws all introduced very forward-looking aspects for our banking sector. We have strengthened supervision, we have strengthened regulation, and we have implemented the rules with no exception. We have gone through important reforms in our social security system. That was 2006. We have went through a very important healthcare reform, a universal healthcare coverage which has low cost but very high satisfaction level. Our public financial management went through a very important reform in 2004. So in a way, our fiscal adjustment efforts was also very, very important. So before this 2008-2009 crisis, we were able to bring down our budget deficit, we were able to bring down our public debt. So the two major sources of crisis, banking and public finance, were actually our source of strength before the crisis of 2008-2009. That was one of the things which actually differentiated us from the rest of Europe. What we have done during the crisis was also very different. In 2009, when many countries were announcing fiscal stimulus programs to stimulate growth in their economy, we followed the other way around. Although in 2009, our economy was shrinking at 4.8% because of the reduced exports to the European Union, we announced a fiscal consolidation program that sounded very counterintuitive for many. They said, what are you doing? During the time of a shrinking economy, you should just spend more. But our position was very clear. We said that if our economy is going to grow, this is going to be by the activity of the private sector, not by the activity of the government. Government spending is only about 20% of the total spending in Turkey. Government investments are also only about 20% of the total investments in the country. So for a country where public debt can always be questioned, fiscal stimulus programs probably won't work. So that was our position, and we announced a 3-year program, not just a 1-year program, but a 3-year program of fiscal consolidation to bring down our budget deficit even further down, and also to bring down our public debt even further down. That worked out excellent for us. The confidence came back very fast. Our banks continued to lend. Our consumers started to spend, and our private sector started to invest. And by high lending, high investments, and high level of domestic consumption, we had a growth rate of 9.2% in year 2010. This was followed by 8.5% growth in year 2011. During the last 2 years, we were able to create 3.7 million additional jobs. And also our income distribution improved dramatically. The Gini coefficient in Turkey has dropping systematically for the last decade or so. OECD announced a report at the end of 2011. Across the OECD members, Turkey is the country which was able to decrease its Gini coefficient with the highest magnitude. This was a result of targeted social policies. This was a result of our new income tax regime, which we introduced back in 2007. And also this was a result of competition working in Turkey better and better. So no longer privileges or special protection areas for certain companies or families. It's a fierce competition going on inside the country. So no more making easy money. And our companies, which are competitive in the country, in Turkey, are becoming very strong competitors in Europe and elsewhere. So in a way, learning our companies to stand on their own feet and to survive and make money by only being more efficient and productive, those companies are now becoming regional and global companies. Our banks also stood very strong all throughout the crisis. We didn't have to transfer any government funds to any Turkish bank. We didn't even change our guarantee scheme. Although across the EU, the guarantees for deposits were increased to 100,000 euros at least. In some countries, it was a blanket guarantee. We didn't even touch our guarantee scheme. And as it was proven in our stress tests, which we have been doing periodically since 2004, every single Turkish bank and every single balance sheet stood very, very strong. So, in a way, our strengths before the crisis were different. Our policies during the crisis was different, and our results are also quite different from what has been going on in most of the European countries. But this success also came with some side products. The inflation is now slightly higher than what we would like to see, and also current accounts deficit of Turkey is also quite high. And in order to have a growth, not just a high growth, but a sustainable growth, we have decided to continue with our tight fiscal policies. Our budget deficit last year was only 1.3% of our GDP. This is one of the lowest across Europe. This is quite low by any measure. Our debt to GDP decreased to 39.4% of our GDP. And our public debt will go down to about 32% by year 2014. We are going to continue to use the macroprudential measures with our banking system in a very careful way. Because of high current accounts deficit, we have to start to tighten the banking policies since the end of 2010. And since the middle of 2011, our central bank started to tighten the monetary policy as well. So the tight fiscal policies are now also accompanied with tight banking policies and also tight monetary policies as well. So this year's growth we expect to be at around 4%. That is intended because we wanted, as I said, this growth to be a growth which will continue towards the next years, not just have high growth for a few years and see a difficult situation after that. Structural reforms is going to be at the core of our policies for many years to come. Labor market reforms, which we are now working on, to bring more aspects of flexibility, to give more elements of competitiveness for our companies, is going to be very important. Enhancing the investment environment, giving more reasons for the private sector to invest in Turkey, which is already happening, but we want to see it to reach better figures. Increasing the saving rates in the country is also a very important target for us. Because of the very high consumer confidence level in Turkey, mainly because of that, but there are also other reasons, the saving rates in Turkey dropped to 12% of our GDP. So people have their full trust for future. They tend to spend, but not to save. And that's why now we are coming up with new measures to give more reasons for our citizens to save. Not forcing them, but in a way giving incentives to save. It is also going to be an important target for us to make Istanbul one of the leading financial centers globally. And we have an action plan, and we are in the phase of implementing that action plan and heading for the 100th year anniversary of the Republic. And that date, we would like to see Istanbul as one of the 10 leading financial centers globally. Many steps being taken towards that direction, and we have the luxury of having a good business environment with low taxes for a foreseeable future. In many countries in the developed world, taxes are going to be increasing very fast, inevitably. There is now a talk about a financial intermediation tax, which could be implemented across Europe or more countries. But in Turkey, since our budget and our public finances are in such a good shape that we are going to have the luxury to keep our taxes low for a very long time. Energy is also another important item. We are too dependent on energy and oil imports, and that's actually one of the main reasons of the high current accounts deficit. If today we didn't import any oil or gas, our current accounts deficit would be a very negligible number. So we are moving into nuclear energy now. We are moving into more renewables, and energy efficiency programs are also in our agenda. When we just look around us and look at Europe and what is going on there, because Eurozone nowadays seems to be the most crucial region, let's say, when we look at the global economic outlook. At the core of the issues, we have weak banks. At the core of the issues, we have very high public debt which is almost as high as the levels that we have seen during the Second World War. So far, ECB has been working a lot, but only by more liquidity, only by printing more money, the problems in the European economy is not going to be solved. ECB's work can be only regarded as a work which gives an opportunity window for the governments to do the real job, to do the fiscal adjustment, to do the absolutely necessary structural reforms, reforms that will bring more competitiveness, reforms to deal with the social security system, which is heading to bankruptcy in quite a few number of countries. And also in the European Union, we need a strong common fiscal framework. Euro started almost a decade ago, so there is one common currency, but every country used to have very different fiscal policies. And now it is time, we believe, for a strong fiscal union, not just a political union or a monetary union, but a fiscal union as well. The six-pack, the fiscal compact, these are all good steps